Hello and welcome. This is the very first episode of Three Teams Sports Show, the sports show where I talk about three teams. Today's team is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I wanted to make this video long before the season actually started. I was really thinking about this during preseason. I was trying to go through the roster and guess who all would make the 53-man final roster. Obviously, fast forward a little bit, we are through week 2 and the Jags have started 0-2. So I wanted to get a couple thoughts out about the roster and preseason moves before kind of going into where we're at currently. So I really thought that the roster moves and the coaching change, the defensive coordinator coaching staff change, it was really boom or bust. I think a lot of good things, a lot of good acquisitions, a lot of signings that made sense. So like bringing in Mitch Morse, veteran center, because obviously center play was a problem last year. I thought that was a good idea. Re-signing Ezra Cleveland. So those were two big moves to try to strengthen, bolster the offensive line. I was pro not signing Calvin Ridley again. The Tennessee Titans gave Calvin Ridley a ton of money. I thought Calvin Ridley had one of the more overrated or empty 1,000-yard receiving seasons ever because the offense still just kind of stumbled. So I liked Gabe Davis. I liked the Gabe Davis signing a little less when I saw, I believe Curtis Samuel was signed as his replacement for less money. I think Curtis Samuel's probably a little more dangerous. But that was just a, thought at the time. So I really worried about, and I'm still worried about this team's secondary. So the secondary, Darius Williams had a great season, like fantastic season in Jacksonville, and I think he's back in Los Angeles now. But I like Ronald Darby, pro the Darby signing. I just worry that the depth isn't there. This was a preseason thought. This is me looking at the roster being like, because if something happens to Tyson Campbell or Ronald Darby, then you're really already going to your depth guys. So, and fast forward 2 weeks, Tyson Campbell's hurt. And Tyson Campbell, obviously the organization's a big fan and they should be. However, his injuries are Achilles and quad, which are bad injuries. There's no other way to say that. Like, quad injuries have really messed up some professional athletes, and Achilles injuries are known to sap explosiveness and to be difficult to recover from. So that's concerning. It was concerning before he got hurt too. So Zay Jones is gone, but you got Gabe Davis. I think that's a totally adequate replacement, and I personally believe the combination of Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Gabe Davis, and drafting Brian Thomas Jr. I actually like that setup better for Trevor Lawrence. I think he's a great quarterback. Obviously, I'm a Jags fan, so that's part of it, but he seems to want to play the hero and kind of force things at times. I think at Clemson he could get away with more of that. Beating people with athleticism and size doesn't work as well at the pro level. I wish that Trevor would kind of be able to take his time, because he hasn't been able to take his time. But I think the game would come, if Trevor would let the game come to him, I think it would go better for the Jags offense. There's not a throw, pass, whatever you want to say, on the field that Trevor Lawrence can't make. He has the arm talent. I think he's decent at diagnosing defenses, knowing where to go. I don't think that's the issue. I think he gets a little itchy, a little happy to try to make something happen all the time. So I like the receiver by committee approach for him, because if Trevor can stand in the pocket and just deliver strikes to move the ball downfield, I think he's absolutely capable of doing that at a high level. So I was very supportive of the receiving core, I think Evan Ingram's a top 5 tight end in this league. He had the best tight end season in Jaguars history last year, period. Franchise history, period. He's great. He's gotten better since his days in New York. They signed him to a long-term deal, as they should. He's somewhat of a leader on the team. Great pass catcher. Great guy for Trevor Lawrence to have and develop a chemistry with. He was obviously hurt for week 2. Obviously played a factor. Obviously the Jags didn't game plan for that. Little malpractice maybe, a little mismanagement. So there's a couple guys that I didn't really know how to feel about going into the season. Tank Bigsby looked a lot better in preseason and better early on in the season. And they made it a point of emphasis this offseason to get him going. Doug Peterson said that. I was pretty upset with the Tank Bigsby pick after how last year went. And then same for me with Brenton Strange. You have like your second, your third round picks. And I'm just curious. I'm just wondering if those guys could get it going, because up until the beginning of the season, Dearness Johnson was better than Tank Bigsby in my mind. So that kind of leads me to the whole overall roster thing being boom or bust. I think strengthening the depth would have been really, really smart. And it's almost like they tried, didn't always hit the mark. Because, for example, so Evan Ingram doesn't play, and you're going straight to Brenton Strange. Now, Brenton Strange stepped up better than I thought he would, to his credit. But there's other guys that you could have put in there, because I just don't feel good about a combination of Luke Farrell and Brenton Strange if Evan Ingram misses any type of time, right? Come on. You have a franchise quarterback, today's pass-happy league. That just doesn't seem like really where I'd want it to be. And I don't know possible other guys, but like Dan Arnold was a tight end with the Jags for a short amount of time. I think he would have at least had some more pass-catching experience. But again, Brenton Strange stepped up, so kudos to him there. On the defensive side of the ball, a lot of questions about depth. A lot of questions. Jarian Jones. Surely it's Jarian, right? Surely. I hope he's good, but guys like Darnell Savage, Trey Flowers, these guys that were brought in, I think there were big shoes to fill from Darius Williams and Rayshon Jenkins. Rayshon Jenkins was a defensive leader for the Jags, played his ass off in that secondary, made a lot of plays, made a lot of plays for that defense. And Cisco being the other guy, the other safety. Cisco absolutely has the talent. Cisco's also missed some time with injury, and it's like, again, if he goes down, if he's not there, who's stepping up? Who's making plays? Who is stuffing the run from the second level? Who is forcing turnovers in the secondary? Had really big questions about that. Defensive line, big portion of this offseason for the Jags centered around the defensive side of the ball. So they brought in Ryan Nielsen, switching to a 4-3 defensive scheme as opposed to 3-4. And he was a previous D-line coach. He coached the Saints D-line and then was in Atlanta. And he keeps talking about like intensity. He's and everyone, when you read things about him, everyone's talking about how intense he is. Very intense guy. He's always preaching be aggressive, attack, intense type of thing, which is good. You want that out of a defense, and you have to have it out of a defense at the NFL. Like, you have to be intense. You have to come at dudes with bad intentions, essentially, trying to force turnovers, trying to get a little nasty on the defensive line. And to that end, I think in that regard, it's probably a good move for the Jags overall. Just they probably need that, and a 4-3 scheme is what Doug Peterson had in Philadelphia when they won the Super Bowl. So I think he probably feels more comfortable with that. And they're talking about rotating more Dean linemen in. They drafted a guy, Mason Smith, out of LSU, if I'm not mistaken. Get him some action and develop some of these other guys along the defensive line so that you're not just relying on Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen. And I think bringing in Eric Armstead was really, really smart because he seems like a really good complement to those guys. You have your pass rushing bookends, but you need a guy who can get pressure from the interior. Eric Armstead can do that. So I was happy with that signing. I'm cool with Ryan Nielsen. I don't have an issue with that. I think it could be beneficial. This is part of the boomer bust theme. I think it could be beneficial. I think that attitude needs to be there to succeed. However, the Jags last season scapegoated Mike Caldwell, the former defensive coordinator. They were running a 3-4, which is where Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker got the outside linebacker designation sometimes because they were asked to, drop back and, cover the flat or whatever. So I think the scheme shift was to kind of more accommodate that personnel better because you ultimately want Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines Allen in the backfield, putting pressure on the quarterback. You don't want to ask them to do other things. I get that. I think that makes sense. However, they fired Mike Caldwell after last season's late collapse. And the late collapse, you could say it's a lack of intensity, right? That's one of the things that you're trying to change with Ryan Nielsen. Is you need guys to be aggressive, you need guys to attack, and they weren't doing a good enough job. They weren't causing enough, mayhem turnovers on the defensive side of the ball. Like they crumbled against Jake Browning, the Bengals backup last season. Jake Browning carved up the Jags defense. So I get that performances like that, you can the defensive coordinator. I get it. That can't happen. However, it wasn't all Mike Caldwell's fault. In fact, I think there's a very good argument to be made that that they scapegoated him, that it wasn't his fault at all. Maybe not at all, but wasn't primarily his fault. I think primarily it was the offense's fault. Trevor Lawrence got hurt. They sputtered down the stretch, period. Offensive line play was inconsistent. That's been the big talking point in Duval since last season and all offseason and the beginning of this season. And they've started off playing like butt cheeks. They've been terrible. Anybody will tell you that. Anybody that's watched the games, anybody that studied the film, the tape, I think the coaches would tell you that. So one of the things that has to change, has to change, and I think ultimately this falls on Press Taylor and Doug Peterson, and it really could end up costing both of them their jobs. I think if Doug Peterson would can Press Taylor, we could be singing a different tune, but that's his guy, and it seems like he's going to go down with the ship, which is the wrong decision. Two really important things I want to point out. I don't have the stats in front of me. You don't need the stats to paint the picture. Anyone that watched the games would believe it and knows. But the Jags were like the worst, I think literally the bottom team in the NFL in red zone scoring last season. Last season, there were just too many empty possessions or trips to the red zone where they came away with a field goal or didn't cash in, didn't hit pay dirt, and that doesn't work. And I thought part of that was like Calvin Ridley had struggled with drops, and I thought they were trying to feed him a little too much, to make him look like this great elite receiver. Not saying he can't be a great receiver at times. I just don't think he's like the franchise wide receiver one type that you give big money to. And I don't know that. There's some other guys that you can blame, and there are other factors too. But way too many field goals. Way too many field goals. You come away with 3 points, 3 trips to the red zone, and it's like, cool, we have 9 points. And the other team only has to score a field goal and 1 touchdown, and you're down. So you can move the ball up the field, but if you don't cash in the end zone, like, you're going to lose. You're just going to lose, regardless of what the defense is doing. You're just going to lose. So that was a huge issue, and still seems to be one that they haven't figured out at all, which is super frustrating. there was another point to be made. So, special teams. They brought in a rookie kicker. I thought McManus was a good signing. McManus also kind of faltered down the stretch a little bit in Jacksonville last season. This season they have a rookie kicker, and it's like, I get it. He's been good. You want to see him develop. You kind of want to have your own guy at that position. Keep signing free agents. Doesn't really seem to work out. Like, a lot of times kickers kind of get in one place and they stick. They're comfortable and they make a lot of their kicks. So you're hoping for that with Cam Little, but I watched Cam Little miss a field goal against the Browns. So that's been kind of a, for lack of a better term, a shit show as well. And I do think one really good signing, to go back to some of the roster moves, I thought Devin Duvernay was an excellent Jamal Agnew replacement. I think it would be hard to replace Swagnew. The explosiveness is there. I think if anybody can do it, it's Devin Duvernay, and I like him better as an option on the offense as well, because Press Taylor, Doug Peterson, offensive play callers, they love to get cute. And I wish they wouldn't. I really wish they wouldn't. They so many times last year, it seems like they tried to work Agnew into the offense, and it just wasn't happening. I remember watching Trevor Lawrence doink like a pitch off of his helmet for a turnover, and it's stuff like that Trevor's got to eliminate. The offensive coordinator or play callers, they have to eliminate. They have to quit being cute like that. So I really like the Duvernay signing. I also really like the Mac Jones signing. Really high on that. I thought if anyone, Doug Peterson's kind of a quarterback whisperer, or has that reputation. So I thought, what better place if anyone is going to show up, change the scenery candidate type of guy. If anyone's going to show up and excel under Doug Peterson, it's Mac Jones. In a new situation, it's Mac Jones. I think that was a great signing. I think he's exactly where he needs to be. And one big thing for me as a football fan, for backup quarterbacks in the NFL, this is a pet peeve of mine. If you're a backup quarterback in the NFL and you get playing time, sling the rock, throw the ball, gun it, take chances. No one expects you to not turn the ball over. You're the backup. The worst thing you can do is just rest on your laurels and try to throw, little dink or dunk screens and never move the ball, never move the chains. Look at Gardner Minshew, who was in Jacksonville. Backup type guy, journeyman type guy, and he totally turned it into a full-time job, and is now thriving with the Raiders. Gardner Minshew's not afraid to sling the rock. He's trying to make it happen. So I think Mac Jones will do that. I think Mac Jones is a great candidate to do that. I think he can excel under Doug Peterson. I think Doug Peterson can get a lot out of him. I think Doug Peterson can still get a lot out of Trevor Lawrence. The largest issue thus far has been the offensive line. Trevor Lawrence is, hesitant at times, and then over aggressive at times. He doesn't have time to sit back and go through his reads. The long developing plays, the deep shots, you need to have a good intermediate or short game, quick short game to get those routes open, and to open the running game a little bit too. The Jags have the offensive talent. I think the play calling's pretty bad, and I think the O-line is terrible. I think Scherf's taken a step back. Cam Robinson, I've been a Cam Robinson believer for a while. I don't think he's as bad as people think he is. I think he's inconsistent, and he has started off this season rough. But football is also it's a team game. It's a team game, and the offensive line is a unit, and it's they suck as a unit. So that's a lot of my early thoughts, a lot of the things that I wanted to go over. I thought that I thought that there was like probably a couple guys left in free agency or on the market that the Jags could have made a play for, and a lot of them were probably holding out for extra money that the Jags didn't want to shell out, which I can understand. That's part of it. You're playing the budget game, so it is what it is on that front. But guys like Stephon Gilmore, Xavier Howard, J.C. Jackson, Patrick Peterson were all available. I think some of them still are available. Veterans. All those guys have longevity in their NFL careers. So sign them for depth. Have a veteran presence on a relatively young team, a relatively young defense, right? Like Xavier Howard was super highly rated for a while. Madden, like one of the top rated cornerbacks. Sure, he's a Pro Bowler. Was a Pro Bowler at some point. Gilly, obviously, Stephon Gilmore, I think he signed. J.C. Jackson, up and down. Patrick Peterson, there for a while, was considered a lockdown corner, one of the best in the league. Justin Simmons, Micah Hyde, those guys the Jags had chances to go after any of those dudes. They didn't really. But the one guy that they did end up signing, bringing back to Jacksonville, I will say this, is Tayshaun Gibson. Familiar face. He revived his career in San Francisco a little bit, but he also won't play until week 6 because he got suspended for PEDs. So there is that. As far as where the Jags are at currently, I'll tell you one other guy that I missed that I wish they would have kept. DeJuan Smoot, Big Smoot, man. I thought as like a situational pass rusher or like a depth pass rusher, I liked DeJuan Smoot. Like 6.5 sacks, a year type of guy. I think the Achilles injury probably set him back a little bit. I think he hurt his Achilles, but they didn't bring back DeJuan Smoot. Anyway, I think as far as where they're at, it's tough. The Jags like to beat the Bills, so their next game's against the Bills, but I believe it's at Buffalo, which is tough environment. Josh Allen looks great. I was lower on the Bills this year. I thought, window's probably closed. Josh Allen, everyone loves Josh Allen, and I get it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Josh Allen. He's obviously very good. And the Bills look like good as a unit. The defense still very, very good at forcing turnovers. Von Miller looked good in week 2, and he's getting up there in age for an NFL player. So getting an extra spark or jump out of a Hall of Fame type pass rush guy, yeah, even though they lost Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, the defense still looked really, really good for Buffalo. They smacked the Dolphins. I don't think the Dolphins had any wind in their sails whatsoever, but they absolutely crushed them. So as far as where the Jags are at now, you don't want to panic. You don't want to overreact to 0-2. You don't. Problem is if they lose to Buffalo, then they play Houston. And you could very, very quickly be 0-4. That's tough. That's a tough place to be. And when the offense looks like it did against the Browns, it causes panic. It would be one thing, I think, if the Jags took the lead, didn't get a stop, the Browns effectively moved the ball, and the Jags came up with a field goal or something, and it's like super close, but they're trading, going back and forth. The Jags are obviously in the game. It's not super ugly. I think you could be singing a little bit of a different tune if that were the case. That's not the case. The Jags looked horrible. They looked awful. Watching the Falcons execute against the Eagles, who are like a Super Bowl hopeful, made the Jags look like a high school team. They looked terrible. They couldn't execute anything. Trevor sailed a pass or 2 or 3, or had, a couple guys dropping it. Like, I think Christian Kirk will come around. Give him some time. He got hurt last year. Offseason obviously wasn't as good as the Jags led us to believe. But, like, there was some terrible play call. I they threw like a 3rd and long, and they threw like a bubble screen or a wide receiver screen to Parker Washington, and he drops it. Like, you can't blame Trevor there. But it's stuff like that it's like you gotta at least be able to get the ball to people. And Trevor Lawrence feeling the pressure, and the Browns D-line getting a safety in the end zone. It's like they had a chance. As ugly as that game was, the Jags still had a chance. And Trevor Lawrence, to his credit, and this is a microcosm of the Jags team as a whole, they love to do this thing where they'll either get down big and try to have to make a game-winning drive. Trevor Lawrence actually has a lot of game-winning drives for a relatively short career. He can do it, right? He can march the ball down the field pretty quickly. He can get in a zone and he can just deliver. That has happened, and that can happen. The Jags will either go up big and then absolutely, it looks like they're going to cruise. They'll absolutely crumble in the second half and just turtle in and absolutely blow it, or they'll find a way to stick around, or they have to make this game-ending heroic drive to get the win when they've been getting pushed around all game. Super, super annoying. So, like I said, I think the Jags have a better chance to beat the Bills than a lot of people think. I think the O-line should play better. The general morale is pretty low. So I think expect better games. Like, expect Cam Robinson to step up. Like I said, he can be inconsistent, but I think the Jags have a chance to beat the Bills. I also think the Jags have a chance to beat the Texans. Texans' offense is stacked as it is. The Bears' defense actually had them pretty reined in, and people are kind of hip to what the Texans are going to start doing now. So really, the hope is you just don't go 0-4. You start off 1-3, not ideal. But if you beat the Bills this week, people won't be calling for Doug Peterson's job or Trent Baalke's job like they kind of are already, because there's expectations in Jacksonville. This team went 9-8 the past 2 seasons. Won the division the first one, didn't win the division, and didn't get in the playoffs in the second one. I think honestly, as Jags fans, you should be happy with 9-8, because if you watch the Gus Bradley years of Jacksonville football, everyone expects you to go. At the time it was 4-12. Everyone expects you to go, 5-12 every year, 4 and whatever, 6-11. We want to avoid those type of seasons. Take 500, take 9-8, be competitive. Don't look like you don't belong on the field. So I'll pick the Jags. I'll pick the Jags in Week 3 against the Bills. I'm going to stick with my previous take. I think the Jags get a W. I think they get a win here. I think they'll get on their horse. There's other teams that have started off terribly as well, and pass yards and pass touchdowns are down year over year for the league as a whole. So the Ravens are also 0-2. The Bengals are also 0-2. 2 Super Bowl hopefuls out of the AFC. So I think the Jags have started slow, but I'll pick them to win against Buffalo this week. Again, this is the inaugural episode, the exodus of 3-Team Sports Show. So thanks for checking in. Hope you liked the video. We'll see you on the next one.